So we're learning the Maimer Erdana Vere. I will come down and see. Is it as advertised?
I'm going to check it out and see what's going on.
Right. So the question here is, how does Ashgacha work? We said that the philosophers believe that God created the world. Some of them, not all of them. Aristotle, for instance, didn't think that God created the world. He thought that time was also just as old as God, was predated the world. And the Rambam has this whole bash with him. But in general philosophy, especially Plato, they did agree that there was something called creation, and they did agree that God ran the world. But what they couldn't wrap their head around, literally, as we'll see, is that God knows all the details, all the particulars. That they couldn't figure out. That they couldn't connect it with their way of thinking. So he wants to explain why it's this way. This is called Ashgacha Pratis. Why is it that a person does not lift a finger from below unless it's declared from above? Okay, so we said there were two reasons. One is technical, as it were. It's too distant. Why would the providence go all the way down to the details? And the second was more, you could call it, in terms of derech eretz, in terms of what is proper conduct for a ruler, for a king. He's not supposed to micromanage. Okay. So
what were the two things you said the Baal Shem Tov said?
So the Baal Shem Tov said that there were two innovations, Ashgacha Pratis, and that he said did become accepted, but all the way through around the world. Everybody now feels, even though they can't explain it, what the Alter Rebbe is now going to do is explain Ashgacha Pratis. But even though they can't explain, they believe that Hashem has providence over every single act in the world. Everything is connected above. What they couldn't accept is recreation at every moment.
Constant creation.
Constant creation is something that they couldn't. There was a guy called Hoyle, Fred Hoyle, who in physics, his name is Fred Hoyle. He's a physicist. He's Jewish. I think he is Jewish, but I'm not sure. Maybe he's not.
I read a lot of his.
I don't remember. I have his book. Who was very good at popularizing science in the 70s. So he advanced the theory of constant creation. Very interesting. He was in serious physics. He has this theory. It's not been widely accepted at all, but there is such a theory that exists, that everything is being recreated at every moment. Okay. It goes against
physics.
It goes against mostly the whole concept of what we call entropy, which is the whole thing of preservation of energy.
Energy, correct.
Okay. Again, the fact that you think the energy is preserved is an axiom. It's an axiom. There's no proof for it. It just seems to be that we can explain most things by assuming that this is the case. In any case, getting back to here. So now he says, "V'chazal kivnu." So why did the sages, they use specifically this idiom that is revealed before him and he knows. It's revealed and known before him, before God. V'chazal kivnu letaretz b'dibur echad b'omram galui ve'yadua. This whole problem of God coming down to the particulars was meant to be explained by the sages by this phrase. And this is in general how you have to learn the sages. You have to understand the sages are like prophecy. You have to understand what they want to say. So they're saying, Galui ve'yadua lifnei misha amar ve'olam. We have this? She'ein yediato.
It's here, no?
Yeah, except, where are we? We're here.
Here?
She'ein yediato.
Oh, okay.
שאין ידיעתו יתברך כדמיון ידיעת האדם איזו דבר. God does not know things the way that man knows things. How does man know things? Man knows by acquiring knowledge. Our mind works by acquiring knowledge that it didn't have before. So by us it's דעתו השיג הדבר ומתחילה לא ידעו. So at first I don't know this, then I know it. What does that mean? That I don't have a picture of everything in my mind before. As I learn things enter, right? That's how it's very hard to explain how we know. But in the end...
It's not intuitive. It's a learning process. You've seen it once, so the next time you recognize it.
Yeah, but we see that you're born without it. We don't have an entire world in our minds, as opposed to Plato, for instance. Plato thinks, theory of mimesis it's called, that all you're doing is you're recollecting. It's very interesting. We also have a theory of mimesis. Where do we have a theory of mimesis?
Torah.
With Torah. And we'll get to this in a minute. But as far as the world is concerned, the objects in this world, I don't know them until I come in contact with them. So I have no picture of them in my mind before I learn about them.
Is this where Descartes gets it from Plato?
What do you mean?
And Descartes says, I know what the ultimate looks like, what's good for me.
No,
so therefore...
Descartes is a mathematician. In math, Plato's whole theory of mimesis wasn't about objects in the world either, to be fair. It was about mathematics. It was about truths. And Descartes, as a Platonist, like most of the Renaissance figures, and he's already after the Renaissance, he's already the Age of Enlightenment, it's called, but all of them held very highly from Plato's theory of mimesis. There's a whole theory, there's a whole strand in the philosophy or history of science that says that the Renaissance revolution in science occurred. They began to understand Plato's opinion. Plato's opinion was gone for a long time. People only studied Aristotle. It wasn't around even in the Middle Ages. In any case, so Descartes was a mathematician. When he said, I remember everything, or I have it in my mind already, what a concept of a triangle, he's going back to Plato's theory of mimesis. But he doesn't, nobody thought this about an object. I'm not aware of, in the East, that's the type of theory that they have. In the East, that's what they think.
You have something like that in déjà vu.
Ken. So déjà vu is a very interesting concept that has to be understood. Where is that from? Where does that come from? So I think déjà vu is very easy to explain, but that's me. That you dreamt it. That's all. It's a dream. It's a recollection of a dream.
Maybe a trick.
Yeah, in any case.
Parlor trick.
Some serious, like William James took it very seriously. He studied déjà vu very seriously because they thought it was a window into understanding how the mind works. I think it's just what we call a relic of dreams. It's not anything more than that. You don't have to make such a big deal out of it. In any case, so a person, when he comes in contact with something, at the beginning he didn't know about it. It was not contained in his mind. There was no picture of it in his mind. So notice the word that he uses. You come to know it, you become enclosed or enclose it within you. Depends how you read this. But the whole understanding of the mind, both in scholastic philosophy and also in Chassidus, is very similar in the sense that the mind is like a sack and you add layers to it. You're constantly adding layers. So whether you're adding them inside or on the outside, we'll see in a moment exactly what it means. But here he says, my mind becomes enclosed within the thought. This thing that I know now. What?
That was only in Torah.
So you're right. So now you're coming to the beginning of it. What's the difference? If there's two options. That's what I hinted at. That either I am now enclosing, my mind is now containing for this thought, or this thought is holding on to my mind. What would be the two? What would be the difference between the two? That if it's just an object, so certainly I'm containing it inside my mind. That's called intention in scholastic philosophy. I'm holding it now inside my mind, but when I set it aside, I will no longer think about it and it will be outside of my mind. There's higher levels of things to think about, not just objects. Let's say an idea. For instance, divine providence. If I'm connected to divine providence, maybe at some level you could say that I thought about it in the beginning and I contained the thought. But if it works, that's why we call it a conceptual object. It's not a real object. It's a way of seeing the world. It at some point it transfers to contain my mind, meaning my mind is always under the conceptual scheme that there is divine providence. I'm operating within that environment. That's how I see the world. So it depends on usually it's just a matter of how this thought is. If it's a particular object, it'll usually just be contained within me. But if it's something greater, like a way of thinking, my mind will be contained in it. And that's why we have these two possibilities of whether the garment is around me or whether I'm adding something inside me and I'm the garment for it. I'm the thing that's enclosing it.
That's what we learned before. We are the garment.
We're a container. Sometimes we're adding a layer outside, sometimes we're adding something inside. If it's an object, it's on the inside. If it's a conceptual scheme, if it's a way of thinking, then it's outside us. Because it guides how we think, how we know things. In any case, it doesn't really matter.
We're talking about the goof, or are we talking about?
No, the mind. Our mind.
The mind.
How our mind works. Obviously, there's no enclosing there. There's no space. There's nothing like that. We're talking about something entirely abstract. But that's the way we imagine it. That's the way we see it. In any case, whether it be this way or that way, the important part is ומחשבה זו שנותן דעתו להשיגה וקודם איתו היה דעתו פנוי, הרי זה בחינת שינוי והתפעלות. In any case, it's new, there's a change, and I'm excited by it, meaning it causes me to act differently. And that's the big thing about itlabshut. Itlabshut, enclothement, which is a whole theory of interaction in the world, which is not mechanical. Right? If somebody tries to understand, today unfortunately that's how they try to understand it, at some level, they try to understand the mind mechanistically. You can understand how the brain functions mechanistically, but you can't understand how the mind functions mechanistically, because the mind does not work by mechanics. It's not which we call hishtadshalut. The mind functions by what we call enclothement. The brain is mechanical, like everything else, just chemical energy being transferred from one place to another. But when you want to understand how this whole very complex mechanical object works, chemical energy object works, you have to look at it in a completely different way. So how do you really measure it? If you want to know what's inside somebody's mind, and you can know, we can connect electrodes to a person's mind, and we can even know exactly what picture they're thinking of, because we have fMRI, and in fMRI, I can put the person for 6-7 hours in an fMRI machine, functional MRI, and I can constantly monitor their brain waves. And for the best I can do. You have to learn Fourier transform. You don't know Fourier, you don't know how the world works today. So the sum total, though, is that the mind can only be measured not through mechanics, but through using what we call waves or fields. The waves that they're measuring are three-dimensional waves, so they're like a field. They're a field of electricity that the brain is creating. That is what we call the relic of the mind. That's how the mind is. So I don't know if I said anything that makes sense, but that's what's called enclothement in our world. That's how we understand enclothement today. So the main thing, though, is that the mind changed how it functions when I came into contact with a new idea, with new knowledge, with a new object, even with a new knowledge, with an object.
Expanded or changed?
Changed. There's no there's no change in the mechanics themselves.
It must be new. It must be different.
Even the picture of somehow more neural connections are created, that's nonsense. It's got nothing to do with it. That's what people say. It's not true. The neural connections are always there. Obviously they're created, but they're not related to the thought process. It's not like this neural connection is now this thought. No. When you have more complex thoughts, the mind needs to create a more complex network to be able to handle them.
Not repurpose it.
But it's not I don't know what that
network.
means. I don't know what that word means. Because that word is a very technical word. It means different things in different places. If repurposing means I had a room, until now it was my living room, I want to turn it into my kitchen.
Repurposing in this context means that you've got a neural network with an X amount of nodes,
Yeah.
and now you're reconfiguring the nodes to understand the...
Exactly. That's what I'm doing.
Right.
And sometimes I don't have enough nodes. This thought is too complex. The mind, the brain does not have the capacity right now to create the wave function needed to contain such a thought. So it needs to create new neural connections. That's what the neural connections are. They're the basis on which it all works. It's like adding more electricity to your house, more amperage.
Bigger switch.
You need a bigger switch. But in the end, the switch is not what you're going to be using at the end. Like we just installed the induction
Plates.
a hot plate, right? Instead of the gas. So to do that, I bought it. I thought, oh, I'm a genius. It only costs 1,000 shekels.
Yeah,
Whoa, what a genius!
You have to change all
You
your
have to
pots and
change.
pans.
No, that's nothing that we had anyway. The problem was you can't use it with a regular plug. You need to get a 3-phase plug. What's a 3-phase plug? You have to take from your electricity from the wall, where it enters, where you have all your switches. You have to take 3 phases. But thankfully, we have 3 phases.
You actually have
at
3
home.
phases. Yeah.
And you have to make a plug that has 5 lines to it. Because there's 3 phases. One, they call it neutral, but it's really like doesn't matter. It completes the circuit and the ground. You ever seen a thing that has 5? That's probably in
Most air conditioners were 3 phase.
a lot of. So that cost another $750. That I didn't think.
What are you going to do in Yom Tov?
What? No. First of all, you can leave it it's like a hot plate.
You'll only stay on whilst you have something on it.
I don't need that. I have a plata. I use a plata anyway.
Okay.
In any case, so we're getting really a drift here. The point is that it changed. The way that I'm excited by this new thought. I've changed. Something has changed. All the more so if I need new circuitry to be able to handle such a thought. That's how it is in a human being. So there's shinui v'ipalut, there's change and excitement or a reaction to new knowledge. Masha'en ken lemala yediato, but Hashem's knowledge is not like that. This is the big deal. Sheyodea kol ha'olamot u'pratehen, en ha'inyan shedalabeshet v'nitpeset b'zeh. Hashem does not enclose himself within the world. It's all within him. The picture of the entire world is within his knowledge already.
And he doesn't need to wake to it.
Of course not. He already knows it. But as we'll see, there's different ways of knowing. So when we walk through life, we're constantly shifting and changing what we know, how we know. Hashem, since he is everything, so he already knows it all. So this is already, the people who had this right, at least partially, were the pagans. The pagans, bad word, not the word I meant. Were the naturalists. Were like Wicca, or
Zoroastrians.
no, they have duality. It doesn't work for them. It has to be that they call it nature. They call it just nature, and they say nature knows all its parts already. There's like Gaia. They have this thing that they call the Earth Gaia. What are they trying to say? They're trying to say the Earth is an organism. And just what the best example is our bodies and our minds. That's the best example in the end. That my brain, everybody's brain, has in it a picture, a map of the entire body. Otherwise, there's no way to explain
Functionality.
how I know that it hurts here. Let's say. There's no way to explain it. I must have, or that I know suddenly it hurts here. Places that I have no knowledge of day to day. I don't know about my heart, but the person's having a heart attack, he knows right away.
Shalonida.
What?
Shalonida.
Okay. But he knows. How does he know? In fact, that's how it works. That if you're healthy, your brain ignores the map of the body inside your head.
Which proves as long as you don't know about it, it's just fine.
A lot of the Eastern practices, what they do is they try to